All right, we are recording now. They're here. Oh yeah, they are here. That's correct. But there's other people that watch. Um, Amber's got somebody at her work, a foster parent that watches these classes online. I've got a couple different other subscribers on the YouTube channel that watch. Sam watches. Um, have y'all caught up for the most part? Shane watches too, but I don't know how. It's usually how often, you know.
I will lie. I will not lie.
I was gonna say you will lie.
I will not lie.
It's like when John Bruce says, to be honest, like he's been lying the entire time. And it's like,
But I have watched the entirety of the first three this last night. It's just to get an idea of what we skimmed.
you skimmed. That's okay. It was just love talking anyway.
I was looking at what the slide said, and I'm like,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. We didn't get very far last week.
I had a lot of conversation in the last video.
There was a lot of conversation.
oh, you can't hear this?
Not very well. And so I've got to get a mic, like a studio mic, to. Yeah. Basically, I'm gonna have to borrow Ben's.
We had a conversation about.
Well, that was kind of the point of it too, and so it would be good to get because I when I listened to it afterwards, because I always go back and listen. And you can hear and you can make it out, but your room has to be completely silent. What y'all are saying, and then the farther you get, so like if Cheryl or Hoyt talk, it kind of gets worse. But when John talks, he's audible for sure. When Wes talks, we can hear Wes pretty well. Well, yeah, we should be able to hear Keith and Nathan and everybody else. So, but that's only because we're going off of the laptop completely for the camera and the mic. So we'll get that taken care of here soon. So last week we talked about a couple different things. We worked our way through the Lord's Supper. We talked about what it means. We talked about a couple different things in that. The first thing that I want to talk about today is at the beginning of Matthew 26. I know we kind of like pieced together some passages last week. We had some really good conversation in that. But at the beginning of Matthew 26, we see where it was conspired. The Pharisees got together. They conspired to kill Jesus. And so it says in verse number 1, it says, "And it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these things, he said unto his disciples, Ye know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified." So there he prophesies of his own betrayal. And then following that, then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people under the powers of the high priest, who was Caiaphas, and who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. But they said, Not on the feast day, lest there be an uproar among the people. So we have not only here we have Jesus prophesying of his own betrayal, and he's letting them know. And of course, we know that Peter has a problem with Jesus talking like this. Obviously, he loved him. The disciples loved him, and so it leads into a couple different things. We read last week that after the Lord's Supper, they in the book of Luke, they got into this kind of squabble among the disciples about who would be the greatest. But the conclusion of the matter is that it's not about who can be the greatest. It was who can serve the most. Who is and as being, not serving themselves, but serving others. It's not about us. It's not about you or me. It's about Jesus and what he's doing. And so we talked about that for a little bit. And then we talked about how that that there was the betrayal, the prediction of it. Well, in Matthew 26, starting in verse 14, we actually see Judas getting hired, he says, then one of the 12, in verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests and said unto them, what will ye give me? And I will deliver him unto you. And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. And from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. So from there on, from that moment in time, Judas, he made the decision to knowingly betray the Savior. Knowing who Jesus was, knowing how much Jesus had already done for him, despite all the miracles that he'd witnessed, despite all the time he spent with him, he still chose to betray him for money. So there's a couple things that people get into when it comes to that: the love of money, being greed, that greed, and that he had. There's so many different things that is just wrong with what he did. John, do you happen to know how much that's worth today?
30 pieces of silver?
Yeah.
Depends on who shekels.
Yeah.
We aren't told what piece of money it was. There was the denarius.
Mm-hmm.
There was the shekel. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was the same amount that you could buy a slave.
It was the price of a slave.
So it was a decent amount in that time. There's so much that we could get into right there, but the point of it is it happened. He was bought with those 30 pieces, and he decided to betray the Lord. I was wondering if you found anything.
They don't know.
No, they don't know.
They don't know.
Okay. That is insane. I know some people that do a lot for 25,000. You know what I mean? Oh. So you're right, and it depends on whether it was shekels or what it was. Okay. So that's just an equivalent then, right? So. Yeah.
He had done that so many times. He was just going to get bonus.
He was going to get, he's already sneaking money from their bag. He carried the bag. And he was just going to get 30, and it's like, did you think that Jesus didn't know you were in it?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, you just made mention of the fact that he had walked with him for 3.5 years. And it's like, he didn't know.
But you know what? Maybe because Jesus never said it.
Yes. But there were so many things that he did. And he would be talking to the Pharisees, and he would talk to them about what they were thinking. And,
surely they talked about it.
And you would think that there would be like a light bulb going off in his head, although there weren't light bulbs. You had a candle going off in his head.
It was hid under a bushel.
Yeah.
He couldn't see it.
Maybe it was like we were talking this morning about Ahab. He got the foreigner prophets to say, whatever he wanted to, and then when the other one came up, he said that God asked in heaven, who will go and lie to this man so he'll go and die? Basically.
Yeah.
Maybe he was. And we talked about this earlier in supper. That maybe it was just intended. He wasn't anyone something that was special. That they weren't going to believe. He wasn't going to believe. He was not going to turn. And so he was a good tool.
Jesus called him the devil.
Yeah. But he also called him friend in the garden.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if that was satire.
And it could have completely been facetious.
I don't think it uses the smart word, but
I didn't bring this up, but in The Chosen, situation that Jesus was going to somehow gather an army and take over Rome. And when he, kind of like right there at the end, when he realized that wasn't going to happen, out of it, he went real dark, real quick.
They all thought that.
Yeah.
Because just before whatever, it's like, that's why he's teaching them, I'm going to wash your feet, and this is how you should be, because they were so, no, I'm going to sit on his right side. And you're like, I'm going to, that's how they were talking. So be very careful.
At the table.
Yeah.
Yes. And
That's the night.
he gets down and he's washing all their feet. And, whoever's the least will be the greatest.
Yep. So with that,
Aren't we glad we have a Bible? Or I didn't read all about it.
Oh man, I'm so glad I wasn't there.
that's right. Yeah.
You're right. Part of you is like, I don't understand how if you're there, but like, there's 12. There's 12 different dudes, and none of them got them. So there's no reason to believe that we would have done any better.
That's right. Well, there's a ton of people that argue that
There's a ton of people
that argue that, oh, well, if I was in the garden, I wouldn't have sinned. There's a ton of people that have that line of thinking, like they're just so much better than Adam and Eve would have been. No.
it's Adam and Eve and not John and Mark.
Well, so, exactly. But it would have been any of us,
And people do that with 2020 retrospect, right? Everyone's like, oh, I know that this is the outcome, so I just wouldn't make that decision. Nobody gets that benefit. Nobody knows how it was going to turn out.
Are you insinuating that the Lord just annulled the marriage?
No, I'm just saying.
A divine annulment? No. That's a joke, by the way. Just to clarify. Talk about a divine intervention. He was having marriage problems.
Everybody in the Bible.
I understand she's a pain, man. Come on.
Had to make the choice.
Not you, babe. It's okay. It'll happen after class.
I thought they had I thought that they're like, oh, Enoch's so important, he gets his name translated to English, his wife not. I thought that's what they said.
No, he didn't see that.
Yeah.
Those two didn't see that.
That's why the old people think that those two are going to be witnesses to tribulation. And it's not. So they got to get sent back.
Yeah, because their reasoning is because it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this is judgment, and so they use that verse to try to justify that. But I think God's ways are greater than our ways, and so it's probably going to be impossible to know. And so no, it doesn't. We won't be here anyway. So
You got the thing in the book of John. Peter's like, well, what about him talking about John?
Oh yeah.
And he's like, don't you worry about what he's gonna do. You do your job.
Yeah, because then he said it at that same breath. He was like, if he lived forever, what's it to you?
And people are like, oh, he's not gonna see that.
Yeah.
And it says that in the book.
There's so many people that I've seen that argument all over YouTube that John is still alive out here somewhere.
Oh, or what they call him?
John the Baptist or John the
Apostle.
The guy with the sword, the only one. The Highlander. He's the original Highlander. That was a good movie. That was a really good movie.
But anyways, let's keep going. Yeah. But he says, and from that time he sought the opportunity to betray him. So we know that his desire after that was just seeking for that opportunity to betray him. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? And he said, Go into the city to such a man, and say unto him, The master saith, My time is at hand, I will keep the Passover at the house of my disciples. And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now when the even was come, he sat down with the 12. And as they did eat, he said, Verily I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. And they were exceeding sorrowful, and began every one of them to say unto him, Lord, is it I? And he answered and said, He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said unto him, Thou hast said. So, exactly.
And he's already done this.
Yeah. So it's Lord, am I going to betray you, knowing full well that he had already made every effort?
Well, in the book of John, it says that at the table the devil entered into him.
Yeah.
At the table, what?
The devil entered into him.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he already knew he'd gone and got his money.
Yeah, it was at the table. It's already done, right?
The payment was
Yeah, but you got to think about it as well. So the devil may have entered into him at the table, but his heart was already set in the way.
Yep.
It's just like when Pharaoh's heart was hardened, God may have hardened Pharaoh's heart, but his heart was already hardened, but prior to God doing that.
Yep.
He had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to let the Israelites go. And so God was like, well, you're not going to you made up your mind. I'm going to let you keep that mind, and I'm going to use it. And so that's kind of the same situation we got here with Judas. Is he had already made up his mind. There was no changing it, and he had already set it up that way. So he became used in that way because it was prophesied. So it's somebody had to do it. Somebody had to do it. It was prophesied, and the Lord fulfills what He said He's going to do, and everything is true. We know that. So, and then carrying on, we see the Lord's Supper, and it goes into a little more depth in Luke 22. But it says, and as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it, and brake it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say unto you, I will not drink henceforth of this fruit of the vine until that day which I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And when they had sung an hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Then saith Jesus unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. Then Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, that this night before the cock crow thou shalt deny me thrice. Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. Likewise said also said all the disciples. So think about that. Jesus, literally somebody that the disciples that were there, save Judas, at that time he wasn't with them. And so the disciples that were there believed in who Jesus was, believed he was the Son of God, that he was going to, do what he said he was going to do. And yet they still choose to say, no, we'll never deny you. We're never going to be offended by you. We're never going to, you're crazy, God. Looking at the face of God and saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And then later on, what do we find? Well, we find Peter denying him 3 times.
Maybe they became so comfortable with him and everything that he did that was abnormal, that they just
became desensitized to it.
exactly
Yeah.
like we're just pretty. I'm not gonna do that. He really did.
Listen to this guy.
Well, it's the same way when he said that,
No, God thinks I'm going to deny him 3 times. Wait, like he would have.
It's just Jesus.
Yeah,
It's Jesus.
well, he asked
my
Peter,
friend Jesus.
he asked Peter, well, who do you say that I am? And he said, thou art Christ, the Son of the living God. And okay, I know that in my head, but you're my buddy.
Yeah.
We've gone fishing together.
And this is not right. This is Simon going back to his old ways a little bit too.
Oh. I mean,
almost again, seeing the shows tonight, you can see the difference between Simon and Peter, and honestly, you can tell which one's actually speaking in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Interesting.
So, I mean, it's kind of crazy what happens there. But like you said, it's very possible that they were, this is my friend, and he's talking like this. But in the same way, they didn't understand either when he was talking about that he would destroy the temple and in 3 days he would build it again. But he was talking about his body, and they didn't understand it at the time.
A lot of things he said they didn't get.
Exactly.
And it's easy for us because we have it all in one book, and we can see the whole story, and we can go back and read it and reread it and reread it.
Yep.
And they got it one time. It was once and done. Yeah. That's hilarious. He's saying, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, and they're like, do we have any bread? And it's like, and we giggle at this, but we weren't there.
Did we miss them?
Yeah, and like I said, we have the benefit of having this book. We have these nights we go and we study this, and we read this, and they heard it the first time, and that was it. There was no writing that they could pick up, and
Think about the road of Emmaus. Those two
Yes.
guys. He said,
yeah, within.
Mhm.
Because he took them through the whole thing.
Yep.
And they were just like dark glasses.
I updated the screen for those of you who have not noticed. Yeah. You need a pen? What? You said update it again? Oh.
What's the third answer?
What is the fourth answer? You're not allowed to know that yet. No. All right. So carrying on through Matthew 26. Then cometh Jesus, in verse 36, then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, sit ye here while I go and pray yonder. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and very heavy. Then he saith unto them, my soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. Tarry ye here, and watch with me. And he went a little farther, and fell on his face, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Now, this is another spot that we stopped at last week, that we kind of discussed pretty thoroughly. We talked about, why did Jesus do this? What part of God gets exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death? What part of God does that? The man part, and specifically of Jesus Christ. So if you were to know your future, and your future were to entail being beaten and ripped half to death or near to death, would you not be afraid? As a human being, would you not be afraid of what's to come, knowing that you're supposed to survive that almost near unsurvivable amount of pain, where he was getting his flesh ripped from his body? Then you got the humiliation to follow, from the crown of thorns all the way to dressing him up like he's a Barbie doll, and just the shame and everything else that he would have felt. being as a man being reduced to this and being made a laughing stock of when you know full well that you are God. And, it's not something that we can really comprehend, but that's the kind of stuff that he was having to think about there. To be able to go through that, and Philippians talks about there that he had to humble himself to become as the lowest of us all, and to be able to humble himself to endure not only the torture but the death of the cross. And in that, just going to the cross, there's a severe amount of pain that you have to endure to be crucified. Without all the other things that happened to him, he had to endure the pain of the cross as well. And so that being said, he had that in mind. And then he goes, well, oh my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Why does Jesus need to do that? Why would he feel the need to do that? And we talked about this, saying that Jesus, as a man, had two wills. He had the will of God, and then he had the will of man. And so he had to submit his human will to the Father's. There wasn't a point in time where God's will is ever wrong or God's will should ever be questioned. But the point of it is that Jesus, as a man, had to become okay with and accept this punishment, even though it wasn't his to take. It wasn't his fault. He didn't sin. He didn't earn it. He didn't deserve it, but he chose to take it anyway. There's a lot of weight that comes with that. And so he had to submit his human will to the Father's and, say that he's going to do it. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou will be done. And in verse 40 it says, and he cometh unto the disciples and findeth them asleep, and saith unto Peter, what, could ye not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation, and the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. And he went away again the second time and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. And then he left them again and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. There's people out there that believe that if you go to God and you pray for the same thing more than once, that you're wrong for doing that. There's people that say, well, then you enter into the vain repetition part. Well, our Lord went and prayed to the Father about the same subject 3 times, which means that just because you don't get an answer right away doesn't mean you stop praying for it. And you can take this any number of ways, but the thing that stands out to me is that he repeatedly asked the Father of the same thing, and he got the same answer, that this is the will of the Father. Today we have options. We have 3 options that are generally talked about: yes, no, and not right now, or maybe later. We don't know what God's going to do. So if you're praying for something, keep praying. Just because your prayer isn't answered right away doesn't mean that He's not working. There's something to think about. Yeah.
Well, in Luke 11, Jesus talks about somebody comes to your door. You have 3 loaves. I'm in bed, the door's shut, bed's out, everybody's in bed. But he won't quit knocking. He's telling us. He says, ask and it shall be given you, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened to you. And it shows this guy repeatedly asking the same thing. So anybody that believes that needs to read it.
Yep. Yep. Um,
Not just one person.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we're going to pray for that we're going to need to keep praying for. Oftentimes, our prayers, while I would say all of our prayers are answered right away. They just might not always be the answer you're looking for. And it's rarely the answer we're looking for, but God's still working and God's still moving. We don't serve a stagnant God. We don't serve a God that just stays still and just is outside of time, that says, I don't want anything to do with your life. No, but his eye is on the sparrow. He knows the hairs that's on our heads. He knows what is going on in our lives and how he can use that and what's going to go on. So, keep praying. So then he says in verse 45, Then cometh he to the disciples and saith unto them, Sleep on now and take your rest. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, Whomsoever I shall kiss, the same is he. Hold him fast. And forthwith he came to Jesus, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? Then came they and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them which were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. And we know that that's Peter from, I think John is the book that tells us that.
All the other Gospels have an unwritten agreement. We're not going to name who did it, and John knows.
Exactly, right? He's the same one that also said, I outran him too.
It was either Malchus, the servant, or Malchus.
Yeah.
One of the two.
I think it was Malchus' servant.
That's what's in my head.
But yeah, so a couple things there. A couple things that stick out. They agreed on the way that he would identify him. After Judas has practically been kicked out, to come up to him and say, what did he say specifically?
They thought he was going to go buy something for the poor. In one of the Gospels, it says that they supposed that he was going to go take care of something that Jesus told him. Judas.
Yeah, but he also had proclaimed already to them that he was the one to betray as well.
I don't think they got it.
They don't think they got it?
I don't think they did. This is this funny thing that he said things, he said red, white, and blue, and they heard green, yellow, and orange. And, and I don't understand that. But then I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But it seems straightforward to me. Maybe he's talking and everybody else is talking at the same time. I don't know. But
or maybe Jesus whispered it.
I don't know. But it's just like, this has always puzzled me. He said, whoever I dip with the bread and the sop with, and so he gives it to Judas, and I'd be like, okay, that's it. He's the one. But no, they missed it completely. Maybe they were all talking amongst themselves and didn't see it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, they could very well have been just reasoning, oh, well, is it you or is it me? Oh, that's right. Well, it ain't me. But, nevertheless, still, when Judas approached him to betray him, he took something that was supposed to be done with endearment, done with love, and one commentary I read is one of the most hypocritical moments in Scripture, where he's identifying Christ with a kiss, something that would have been done between friends, family. It was a very familial greeting, and it was something that was not done in this way, you know. Except for Chayton. Chayton's weird, and he, I know Chayton like goes around and kisses everybody, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm just taking the Bible verse literally, you know, greet one another with a brotherly kiss or whatever. And I'm just like, get off of me, man. Uh, but you know, so everybody else but Chayton takes this seriously, and so. But again, so, and it says that forthwith he came in 49 to Jesus, and he said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said to him, Friend, wherefore art thou come? And then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And then we saw that, you know, Peter chopped off the dude's ear. And then Jesus corrects him. He says, Then Jesus said unto him, Put up again thy sword into his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot pray to the Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled that thus it must be? You know, Jesus, he points out there that if he wanted to defend himself, he could have. There wasn't anything that Jesus went through that he didn't go through willingly. You know, he said he said that it wasn't up to them. You know, that, you know, on the cross they joked around with him about made fun of him and challenged him, saying that if he be the Christ, if he be the Son of God, you know, come down from there. He could have. He could have. He could have gave up at any moment, but he didn't want to. He took all of our sin and he took all of the pain and sorrow that came with it willingly and died in our place. You know, he didn't have to do any of it. And then he says, in that same hour, said Jesus to the multitudes, Are you come out as against a thief with swords and staves for to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you laid no hold on me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. So the people that supposedly had his back, that said, I will never deny you, I'll never forsake you, that you're my friend, you're my God, you know, there's so much there that they said that they wouldn't do. Peter said he'd never deny him, and then he sulked around in the background. You know, we carry on through there, and then we see that he's brought before Caiaphas in the Sanhedrin, and in verse 57 it says, And they that laid hold on him, on Jesus, led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him afar off unto the high priest's palace, and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. And at the last came 2 false witnesses, and said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God, and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it that what is it which these witness against thee? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ or the Son of God. So in this, we have the trials. That's the next blank. There's so much going on here. One thing that everybody points out throughout many commentaries is that the way that they do this is just wrong. It's not a legal trial, you know.
Kangaroo court.
Yeah, there's no weight in this because of how they're choosing to do it. You know, trying to see what David
Tradition
Guzik
tells us
says.
the Sanhedrin could not be a night.
Yeah.
I find it's very odd. The outcome already decided. What is the point of this charade?
This is a Russian court.
It was just.
Well, I get that, but why not just straight up go to execute?
They can't. They don't have the authority.
Like I know that, but like why wouldn't they just go straight to the Romans and say, hey, this guy,
maybe
we
they had to,
determined.
maybe they had to line everybody up. Maybe they had to get their courage up.
Oh yeah, they would have had to get the crowd going in order for them to have that.
So this is what David Guzik writes. He says this nighttime trial was illegal according to the Sanhedrin's own laws and regulations. According to Jewish law, all criminal trials must begin and end in the daylight. Therefore, though the decision to condemn Jesus was already made, they conducted a second trial in daylight in Luke 22, verses 66 through 71, because they knew the first one, the real trial, had no legal standing. So you get there, and he goes on. You can see this on Blue Letter Bible for those of you that use it. Reading through David Guzik's commentaries, he has pretty good commentaries. He's very thorough, very easy to understand. So obviously there's a couple things there that were wrong in how he did it, how it came down. But notice in verse 63, but Jesus held his peace. It's just crazy. It's mind-boggling to think how much Jesus had already gone through at this point, and being a man, just without saying anything, how peaceful he was, that he was able to hold his composure through all this ridicule, through knowing these false witnesses being there. Had any of us men in here been in this position, this wouldn't have gone that far without us messing up. That's for sure. I know I wouldn't have got very far. I'd have been Peter. I'd have been already cutting people up.
I watched videos of lawyers talking, and they said the hardest thing that people have to do when the police arrest them is say, I take the Fifth Amendment, shut your lips and say nothing. Ask for an attorney, and no matter what they say, don't say a word, because it's our nature to respond.
Everything you say can be used against
And they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything you say.
Don't be writing that stuff down on me. That's not what happened.
Let me say that. That's why in the garden it's called prayer in the garden. Meeting to the full will of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this thing, just right here where you're reading, they have these witnesses, and the witnesses can't agree. They don't have anything. Cheryl sent me that thing we talked about it last week or Wednesday night that he grew the tree and nurtured the tree and nurtured the people that were going to crucify him. He had to give them the evidence against them because they didn't have anything. He had to say what he says in the verse you're on right now.
Yeah.
He did,
If he opened his mouth, Mike could have just shut it all down.
then he could do that. He had to go through this, so he had to say something to give them a reason.
In verse 64, Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said, nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He has spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now ye have heard his blasphemy. What think ye? And they answered and said, He is guilty of death. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him. And others smote him with the palm of their hands, saying, Prophesy unto us, thou Christ, who is he that smote thee? So there's a lot that just because Jesus said one little thing, and like John said, he gave them a reason. They needed a reason. He had to do it because this was prophesied, so he had to go through it. And he had to do everything by the book, and that book being the Old Testament, the prophecies. So he had to He had to endure all that ridicule and everything. They buffeted him. They put a cloth over his eyes where he couldn't see, and then they started hitting him. He said, "Tell me which one. Which one of us hit you?" Imagine that. And so he went through that. They spit on him, and then now we have Peter, and we're going to stop at chapter 27. But he says, "Now Peter sat without in the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, Thou also wast with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him, and said unto them that were there, This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, Surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech betrayeth thee. And then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, and which said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly.
One of the gospels says Jesus looked at him.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
One of the things that they did, that's one of the things they did really well in the Passion of the Christ. When you're watching the movie and you see him doing that, denying him, and then it pans over to Jesus in the movie. It's insane how real they got that to feel. Just sitting there watching it was like, I don't know, how did it go in The Chosen? For those of you who have watched The Chosen.
I don't have the last season.
Okay.
I don't think it's come out yet. I don't think.
Yeah.
And I keep
I
following.
think it comes out this fall. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I had no idea how far it's gotten in this story here. But man, well, Peter was wrong, and I mean that's really the short of it. Is he literally he was all talk. He got scared. He got terrified. By the power of grade school.
I hope they said that by the power of the Lord.
It just got real serious real quick.
Yeah, they were
It's
looking at their mortality.
Peter had a sword. He was ready to fight for Jesus. And then Jesus says, no, we're not doing it that way. And they're like,
I think about the strength of because I thought I was like, man, could I in that situation? There have been martyrs, right? There are people who are willing to die for their faith. This is before that, right? And I think that really has to come down to the Holy Spirit, right? Like living with people, like giving them the fortitude to be willing to go to death.
Now, there's been others, Old Testament martyrs.
Old Testament martyrs.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, in the face of all of that, can we say that we wouldn't deny him? Probably not.
No.
I would say that I know, knowing myself, that I'd be in the same. I'd have probably boasted just like Peter did. Oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. And then,
I thought about that for years.
They were witnessing.
Some of them were, and some of them were hiding. You know?
yeah,
But those kids that stood up and said, I love Jesus. And then the next one. I mean, how hard? I mean, like John said, I'm going to get shot. I'm just going to get mowed down by these streets. And that's what they were looking at.
yeah.
He had a split second to make a decision, and he made it in the moment.
The rest of them ran away. So,
Except John.
except for John, yeah,
John got him in.
yeah. But except for John, Peter and John, the rest of them ran away. So at least they followed. At least they were there. They stuck with them. But
Most of them ended up dying later.
oh yeah,
All except John.
yeah. It's speculated that John died of old age in Ephesus. So and then exiled to the Isle of Patmos. But
And Peter, you know, he said, don't crucify me like now.
yeah,
Crucify me upside down. So, you know, this whole thing changed Peter.
And when Jesus came back and found Peter, got him straightened out, he was a straight arrow from there.
You know, not exactly.
Well,
He had to fight with Paul a little bit.
oh, you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Is he like that Gentile?
Yeah, you want to be eating at pork.
well, we're going to end there for tonight, and we're going to pick it back up next week. You know, it's going to take us a little bit to get through all of this. We got through a whole chapter tonight. Like how many verses is in that chapter? We talked about a bunch of stuff, but for sake of time, we didn't talk about everything. I mean, we could be here for eternity talking about every single verse. And so I'm not going to do it like Sunday mornings. I didn't structure this class around Sunday morning, one verse at a time, hour-long sermons. But, no, I mean, but that's kind of, like I've been saying, that's pretty much the point of this, is to be able to talk about it. And, of course, the more conversation we have, the longer it takes. And so this isn't a situation where the preacher just won't shut up. It's just kind of like if y'all keep talking, we keep talking. So at least we ate beforehand. That's a good thing. So anyways, we're going to close out for tonight.